Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'a sunnatahu ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show, Guest of the Week, coming to you from Sharjah TV. As always, I'm your host, Ismail Bullock, and today we want to talk about something that is related to shaitan, to Iblis. And I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to let you wait and see what we're possibly going to discuss about him. And to do that with me is Ustad Muawiyah Tucker. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. How are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Have you back on again?
Alhamdulillah. I'm glad to be here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, Iblis, Shaitan al-Rajim. So we're going to talk about how it all started really and how, the first sin and how that in many ways, to some extent, has continued throughout mankind.
Yeah, so I mean, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi al-kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So, Iblis, as we know, we have Allah created the heavens and the earth, Allah created the jinn, Allah created the malaika, and then Allah said to them that He's going to create mankind. And then we know the story. So Allah created Adam, and Iblis saw Adam. You could say that as Adam was being created, because first the dirt was covered together, then the dirt was mixed with water, then the fashion and form of Adam was put together, and Adam was just there lifeless. And the angels looked at Adam, looked at this form of Adam, and even Iblis looked at this form of Adam, even knocked it, and noticed that it was hollow, which is an interesting attribute. Noticed that Adam himself, his creation, was hollow. And he made observations about that. This was the beginnings of the story of mankind. And the ulama have said that that Adam was honored in 4 ways. One was that he was created by Allah's 2 hands, as Allah said in the Quran about Iblis. مَا مَنْعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَا خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْ. What prevents you, Iblis, from prostrating to one I created by 2 hands? So that was one of the unique features of Adam, that he was created with the 2 hands of Allah. Another one of the features unique to Adam was that Allah ordered the angels to prostrate to him. Another one, that he had knowledge and so on and so forth. So there were certain features that made the creation of Adam special. But in that, Allah told the angels to prostrate to Adam. Iblis was amongst them at the time, and he refused. And this refusal, you can literally pinpoint that was the first time that ma'asiyah, that sin, you could say, revealed itself in this creation. Because before that, the angels were there, the jinn were there, and even Iblis himself, Allah gave him tasks, gave him authority, gave him status. I mean, he was amongst the jinn, amongst the malaika, although he was a jinn. So this was a lot of things that was given to him. But this is the first time where he switched.
That's important what you mentioned that he was from the jinn, because many people they take maybe concepts from other beliefs or other religion that he was a fallen angel, and Allah says in the Quran, كان من الجن ففسق عن أمر ربه, that he was from the jinn, and he disobeyed the command of his Lord. So this shows us here that he was a jinn.
Yeah. So ironically, on this topic, there are some of the ulama who have had the opinion that he was from the malaika, and that's generally because of the ambiguity about the original creation. So what's interesting for people to understand is that when it comes to the creation of the heavens and the earth, we've only been given a piece of knowledge. It's very important. Allah always reminds us, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've been given a small bit of knowledge. Even how the heaven was created, he's only given a small fraction, a glimpse of that. So because of that, sometimes the question is exactly what is an angel, what is a jinn, what is their form, what is their reality. So because of that ambiguity, there's some have had that opinion, but the correct opinion, like he's mentioned, Allah said, كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ, then he was from the jinn. But the issue was, Allah asked Iblis, what's the issue here? You've been ordered to do something and you didn't do it. what prevents you from doing so? And he said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. So here we see the beginnings of racism, the beginnings of looking at your original creation and finding virtue in that madda, in that substance. Rather than saying something like, I mean, Iblis could have said something like, oh, because I worship more than him, or I do more good deeds than him. But he never actually indicated or made ishar or pointed to his actions or his deeds. He pointed to his creation. And this is essentially what led him to being cast out of paradise. Meaning, this was a manifestation of something deep-rooted inside of him. Arrogance. Thinking he is better, one of the sources of arrogance. That takabbur. Even Allah mentioned, Malaka anta takabbara. Why is it that you're making takabbur in this affair? He actually, Allah described his action as takabbur. And why isn't it takabbur? I mean, the creator of the heavens and the earth is giving you a direct command to honor this new creation. And by refusal, you're manifesting that I know better. He's not deserving. You are saying he's deserving of prostration, but I know better that he's not deserving of that. So this was the beginnings of that evil trait of arrogance, which I will call racism, that led him to being cast out of paradise. But what I wanted to do, just briefly, it's kind of a side issue, but it's important, is to draw a parallel, or an observation you could say, between what Iblis did and what Adam did. Iblis disobeyed Allah, and when challenged, he defended himself. Adam, when he disobeyed Allah, when challenged, he made tawbah. So we can see here the two sin, although they both were sin, the origins of them are different. The origin of Iblis' sin was arrogance, thinking he's something more than what he is. Whereas the origin of Adam's sin was, you could say, ghafla, deception. He was deceived. Iblis told him something and he believed it. And his ambition took over him and his hawa took over him. But when he recognized his sin, he made tawbah. So we have literally, if you look at the story of Adam, subhanAllah, as an example, literally, you know, I don't want to draw a bad parallel. When you have those films, we have the devil on the guy on the shoulder saying do bad things and the one on the shoulder doing a good thing. But here we have another two example of one person who is fundamentally evil and one person who is fundamentally good. They both made sin, but the sin was different. One came with tawbah. Allah accepted his tawbah. And the joke is, imagine Iblis said, astaghfirullah, you're right. It would have been the end of it. But he continued, he persisted on that. And if you want to ask why, you have to look at the root. What caused Iblis to do sin and what caused Adam to do sin. Adam was purely deception. Allah said, don't do. But Iblis said, no, actually, if you do it, you become an angel, you live forever, you do this, you do this. He thought, wow, if I have this fruit, I'll get all these extra benefits. And he was deceived. Which is essentially what happens with all of us. Whenever we sin, all of us, it's the exact same story. All sin is the exact same reenactment of what happened with Adam. You see a nice lady, you want to marry that nice lady, but for whatever reason you can't marry her. Iblis says, yeah, but if you just give her your number, arrange a meeting, maybe you get what you want and you can do this and you can do that. He's deceiving you that you get what you want, and when you do that, you realize actually this was a mistake, and you make tawbah. So it's different.
But it's interesting as well to mention that ultimately, apart from the fact that the sin, before you even look at the sin, was in reality the sin first of all was actually his disobedience to Allah.
Yeah.
Like, blatantly, disobeying Allah there and there in the company, of Allah.
Yeah.
Disobeying Allah. But obviously that disobeying was due to this arrogance.
Yeah, this facade, there's corruption in himself.
So like you're saying that this is something like a completely different level.
Yeah.
Because, we all fall into sin, but I doubt, hopefully, well, there are many people who do, but generally speaking, as Muslims, when we fall into sin, we don't purposely say, I'm going to I'm going to disobey Allah, like a challenge, you
Yeah,
know, like,
yeah.
you know, whereas Iblis was like, you know, it's almost inconceivable that you're there with Allah and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
disobey Him. So this was the worst of the sins in reality.
Yeah.
But obviously the reason behind him doing that
Was
was
something
because of
corrupt.
his
It was a corruption
pride
inside.
and his,
Yeah.
like you said, this afdaliyah,
Yeah,
thinking that he
yeah.
has some right over him because of the way he was created. And as you're going to see, how some people feel they have a right over people because of their status, because of their money, because of their skin color, because of nationality,
Yeah.
etc., etc.
So it's essentially another way of framing it is that the sin from Iblis came from within, where the sin from Adam came from outside. Adam had no intention of think about it, he had no intention of eating the fruit. It was not something he considered. It was only through instigation why it happened, which I guess, and this is speculation here, I guess which is why in Islam, generally speaking, sins, the knowledge of sins is to be suppressed. Meaning that if you do a sin, okay, fair enough, you did sin, make tawbah, tub Allah. But don't promote it. Don't advertise it. Don't make TikTok videos and show people that you're doing this sin. Why? Because you doing that sin is now da'wah. It's inviting others to do the sin. Much like with Adam, who was invited. So essentially, open sins, but well, as you could say, the children of Adam, generally speaking, we are invited to sin. Whereas Iblis, it came from himself. But this is essentially the source of our discussion, is what led Iblis to where he's going through. Is first and foremost, it was arrogance as a whole, but he justified his arrogance, which he said with this afdaliyah, that he is better than, because he is created from flameless or smokeless fire, and Adam was created from clay. Something that Iblis had nothing to do with it, meaning Iblis had no choice in how he was created. Just like Adam had no choice in how he was created. But he found that there was some kind of virtue in something he had no choice in doing. Anyway, now when it comes to mankind, Islam teaches us that we all came from Adam alayhi salam. Obviously, Adam and his wife had children had children, and we all come from turab. All you from Adam, and Adam's from turab, as the famous hadith. So technically speaking, we shouldn't be exhibiting the same characteristics as Iblis of having virtue over others based on things we have no control over. Now, no doubt, this is an important caveat. Islam doesn't suggest for 1 second that there aren't people who are better than others. Islam doesn't say that. There are definitely people who are better than others. There are some who are the lowest of the low, and some who are a higher status. Islam doesn't say that doesn't exist. But why is someone better than someone else? Because of the actions they do. The taqwa they have, the God-fearingness they have, the charity they exhibit, the good they exhibit to their parents. Things you actually choose to do and actually do, that gives you that virtue. Whereas who you are, in terms of what family you're born in, what tribe you're born in, what passport you hold, maybe even how much money you inherited, none of that has anything to do with your actions.
Can I hold you on that point because it's time to go for a break? Join us inshallah after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Just before the break you mentioned that, and you mentioned the fact that there is a concept of Islam as some people are better than others, but it's not based upon, as we know, Prophet ﷺ said, there's no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab and a black and a white, etc., except for taqwa.
Yeah.
And even Allah says, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. That we have created you from different tribes and peoples and nations. So, and this is the interesting part, لِتَعَارَفُوا. So you may get to know one another.
Yeah.
Not so you may fight with each other,
Yeah.
insult each other, think you're better than each other. And then Allah says, after all of that, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ.
Yep.
That the most noble or the best of you in this, with Allah, in the sight of Allah, are the ones who have the most taqwa, righteousness,
Yeah.
God consciousness, good deeds, etc. This is what makes the person better.
Yeah, exactly. And
even then the person, shouldn't say, I have more taqwa, I'm better than you. Even then, that should not be
Exactly.
assumed. The person should always feel like that person may look like, I may look more of a religious person than him, but this guy could be much better than me in the obligations. Like you may see people who the appearance, but they may be missing the salah all the time.
Yeah.
This guy could be the first person for fajr.
Yeah.
Could be doing tahajjud. So that's also important, not to get this this kind of what's the word I'm thinking of? This the person himself starts to feel that he's better than others because he feels that he has more taqwa than others.
Well, and that's kind of even inherently woven within what you just said, actually. The ayah you just mentioned, أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. As in the best of you with Allah. This is Allah attached this afdaliyah, this virtue back to Allah's knowledge, that which is with Allah. Because we have no access to that knowledge, therefore we can't really perceive that taqwa. So therefore you can't, again, like you said, claim that thing. You can't say, oh, because I'm righteous, I'm better than thou. I don't know that. That is only known by Allah. As therefore you can't claim that. So that's a very, I guess, important feature, you could say, or important thing to recognize, that yes, there are people who are better than others, but because we can't really perceive that, we can only receive that later on. If that makes sense. You can't perceive that here, but you can only receive it later on when we get rewarded in paradise. But what I wanted to touch upon is the issue of this topic of racism, because we mentioned the word racism, quite common, and I kind of drew a parallel with Iblis. Now, fun fact, Iblis is a more justified racist than we are, because he actually was different. He actually was a different race. He actually was a different being, whereas we are from the human race. Human beings are one being. So this concept of racism, for example, or the idea that there are different human races, is actually a foreign concept. This is what I want everyone to understand, is that we talk about it, we understand what it means, we see it, we even speak with its language. But if you actually go back a few hundred years, these ideas were foreign. I mean, they didn't exist. What did exist was virtue in terms of tribes. He's from this tribe, he's from that tribe. Because obviously in terms of social cohesion, social awareness, social coming together, was surrounded by the family. And essentially, if you think about how most governments and societies were structured in the past, it was almost, you could say, I use the word decentralized, in the sense that a society was a collection of families, pockets of families, who coalesced to become a tribe, who may have many tribes who coalesce to become a nation. So essentially, we have pockets of people who have their own associations through the womb, through marriage, through childbirth, through families, and that cohesion, we knew each other. Like even I mentioned, Allah mentioned that He made us shu'ub wa qaba'il, and you notice He never said alwan, He never said colors, He said nations and tribes. So this is actually the reality, a more realistic measure of a person. So some people ask me, for example, I get this common thing when I was in Saudi. They'll say, main aunt, where are you from? I say, Britannia. They go, Asl. They say, where are you from originally? And I laugh because I can say Jamaica, but how Jamaican am I? I was there like for a couple of weeks when I was 6, that's it. I was born and raised in London. I'm a Londoner. So although my colour might be different from other Londoners, my hair might be different than other Londoners, who I am in terms of my character, my behaviour, my attitude, is a Londoner. And that is a more realistic measure of who a person is. You're sha'b, you're a person, rather than a colour. But this idea that you distinguish people through their colour, through their race, for example, as being a real thing, is actually a foreign idea. It's actually almost a Darwinian idea. It's actually an evolutionary idea. This idea that they have some who are more evolved, some who are less evolved. This is one of the sources of this evil ideology. And this ideology was exacerbated, is that the word? Or made more profound, due to colonialism. So if you look historically speaking, prior to colonialism, even if one nation subdued another nation, or even if one group of people was to subdue and enslave another group of people, they were usually from the same physical description. Like, for example, even the Slavs, which is from the Slovakian area, from the Western or Eastern European area, that's where the word slave comes from the Slavs. They were enslaved by other Europeans. So essentially they looked the same. The only way you'd know is the fact that this person was maybe the language or whatnot, but they weren't physically distinct. Even in Africa, when some African tribes enslaved other African tribes, in Asia, slavery existed throughout history, but they were usually from people who looked similar to each other. But for the first time in history, we had Europeans travel to a whole different continent to enslave a different type of people. And here now we see a distinction now be more obvious, down to how a person looks. More specifically, a color, where you have one person looking down on another person due to the associated status of them related to their color. Now, what's interesting still about this historical fact was that even in the early days of this slavery, it still wasn't about color. Meaning, you could still, in the early days of slavery, if you were able to buy your own freedom, as a black person, for example, in America, buy your freedom, have land, and even buy slaves and be treated like anyone else, because it wasn't necessarily about color. This thing manifested itself over years of it being this way. You have the white class and you have the black class. One's a slave, one's not a slave. And now this idea starts to take root, become more and more significant. Especially now it became reinforced with Darwinian ideas. I don't know if anyone knows about how, if anyone actually studies the origins and the beginnings of evolution, when they actually traveled and looked at different human beings, you could say, across the world, and categorized them how much they evolved.
Yeah, I think he had that in his book, The Origin of the Species.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I don't know how anyone could actually read that and actually even think, just by reading that, you know, because like you said, you know, the whiter you are, you know, the more you are a full human, and as you go down, you become less human. It's just crazy, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to justify their misguidance, but from their perspective, they had the technology, they had the wealth, and essentially they also associated human beings as being originated from monkeys. So if we have monkeys, they're not native to Europe, they're native to Africa and other places. So you can see the mental gymnastics here they're making, that we have monkeys in this area, they are more closer to those sides, but we're from the north, we're more evolved, we've changed, we can see from our money, whatever the case may be. The fact is, that was their idea then.
But it's also interesting because not so far back from this time, if any of them had studied and, you know, there's people like Darwin, the supposed intellects, then they would have seen that this same area they're from, when they're in the Dark Ages, no running water, don't have baths, and all kinds of stuff, they would have noticed that back in the Islamic Europe, Andalusia, which in reality were, okay, we know so many people from that region reverted or converted to Islam, but you know, initially they were Arabs, and they were the Moors, which are, you know, pretty much like black African Arab, something along those lines, mixed, and many Africans,
as
Muslims,
non-European basically.
Yeah, non-Europeans. Yeah. And they were when they came to Europe, that was the Renaissance when it came to, you know, like I said, in those countries talking about, they were the best of Europe. They didn't have running water, didn't have the concept of lighting, they didn't have anything. Yeah. You know, they were living literally in the Dark Ages, where they had the Dark Ages, and these Arabs, dark-skinned looking people, Arabs, Africans mixed, they had the best technology in the world, and the best living, and the best, to the extent that they were trying to make packs and ties, and that's why we see, I don't want to go too much of a history lesson, but just to prove a point, that's why we see, you know, even in the let's just say generally in the British Isles, there was a particular king called King Offa. And he had a coin that had La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Now we're not going to go into the fact, did he become a Muslim or not, but the very least that even the non-Muslim historians say is that he did this to appease the Andalusian rulers or ruler so that they could be trading, because they saw of this advancement. So, you know, it would be interesting why those so-called, look at us, we're so intellectual. Why don't they look back and say, hang on a second, we were the same white people back then. You know, we weren't like a different color. We didn't evolve from to white people, but we were in the Dark Ages, and those brown and black people, they were the best in the world, and Baghdad, and it just goes on. But so it's very selective choosing of when to say we are the superior race, because look at us now. When if you go back in time, Africa, Arabia,
even in China,
all these other places. Even let's be realistic. Even if you go back to Greece, they're not very European-y looking. You see what I mean? They're not white skin, generally speaking. You know, so it's interesting how it's very selective history that they choose to supposedly back up their claim of superiority.
It's an ideology at the end of the day. That's the thing. It's an ideology that they try to selectively pick evidence to support it. Whereas, ironically, since those ideas of Darwin, the early ideas of Darwin, it's been proven without a shadow of a doubt that no matter where you go on planet Earth, any human being, just if you picked up a guy who lived in the jungle and you taught him and educated him, there's nothing about him that he can't learn what someone who was born and raised in a Western country can also learn. As in, there's nothing inherently different about them in terms of the ability to have cognitive ability and so on and so forth. So there's no evidence to support this idea of racism, you could say. But back to the point. The point is that this idea is a very un-Islamic idea. The idea that there is virtue in physical exteriors, specifically is ironic, something as subtle as skin color. Let me explain what I mean by that. So me and you, we're very different, but not that different. There are things about me and you that's more different than the skin color. So for example, height, that's significant. As in, you being taller than me or whatnot, you can do certain things more than me. I can do. I mean, there's certain things that you can do that I can't do, and vice versa, based on physical characteristics. And the color of skin is actually the most insignificant of the characteristics, which is an ironic one. Or another way of looking at it, if you was to get like an image of someone, just an image of someone. I think I just saw this is quite a funny thing actually. I saw the other day, they got some celebrities, and they put.
I'm going to hold you there because we need some time, and it's time for a break. Join us inshallah after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Just before the break, I stopped you. You said there was something funny and you said celebrities. So
they got some pictures of celebrities, fed into the AI and told them to make it a different race. So basically you could have someone like, I don't know, some celebrity, and basically made them turn from being, well, quote unquote, a black person to be a white person, a white person to be and when you look at these images, nothing about them really has changed. As in their nose shape looks the same, their lips look the same, their eyes look the same, but the color has changed. But they actually looked the same. I mean, they looked exactly the same in terms of you wouldn't think of them as being a white person with black skin or a black person with white skin. They just looked like a normal person, but the color was different, indicating that there isn't much difference between the skin color from this person and that person. It was just an interesting an exercise, you could say, in how insignificant color is. But moving on. So on this topic of racism and how insignificant it is, we should bring it back to Islam. So what does Islam, we mentioned earlier when we touched upon Islam, what does Islam say about society, how we should structure our society? Our society needs to be structured based on what's called meritocracy, as in merit. What you do that's virtuous, then great. You've got virtue, you work hard, you're trustworthy, you achieve good things for your community, therefore you've earned some virtue in society. For example, and we have that happens all the time. I'm sure you have many people who are known for being charitable. So I remember I was in Saudi. It was known that some of the mashayikh would even give out free food and sadaqah to the tulab who are needy and whatnot, and they became known for this. This is how a person gets virtue, and this is how Muslims should interact and deal with people, deal with one another. So if you meet someone for the first time, don't treat them any particular way other than through virtues that they have earned. So what I want to draw onto, or bring the conversation back to, is what does Islam do, or what can Islam do to remove the illness and sickness, like I do call it sickness, is a mental sickness of racism. And the reason why I call it sickness, just as a slight detour, slight issue, is before I became Muslim, I was a racist. And I don't mean to say that loosely. I mean, I was really, really bad. As in, I used to really hate, quote unquote, white people. And the reason why is because when I grew up, I used to blame white people for everything. It was a thing that I said, oh, because of them, it became a thing that anything went wrong, it's because they did it. And the only way I became Muslim, this is I always mention this as an example, is that when I became Muslim, the irony is that soon after taking my Shahada, one of my closest friends in college was a white guy. And I use this as an example to people, especially in the West, to show that, look at me, I used to hate white people. And nothing about me changed other than my religion. And through Islam, I was able to remove this sickness because I saw him as another human being. And specifically, this is a very important part here, Allah has taught us a very important lesson, that you will not have any reward except what you have done. And you will not have any sin except what you have earned. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. You won't have any sin unless you have earned it. So what I was doing before Islam was I was blaming a whole nation of people for actions of those who are long gone and dead. They're gone and dusted.
But in reality as well, that is racism, right? Because even on the flip side of that, you're going to find some white people who, because of whatever it is, they will, everything that bad happens in society, they'll say it's because of those foreigners, or it's because of those guys, because of those guys.
Yeah, it's the otherisms. And all bad things in my life is happening because of the other person. But back to the point is that with Islam, number one, it brings us back to how, you can almost say it teaches us how to build society. This is the key. This is if you want to take from a social perspective, how do you build an ummah? We always talk about, Muslims always talk about, come here and talk about ummah, the ummah of Muhammad, the ummah of Islam. But how do you build a ummah? You build it through cohesion, making the individuals of the ummah feel as though they are brothers and sisters, because they actually are. I mean, not are in terms of just in Islam. We are actually brothers and sisters from Adam. We're all his children. So we are literally cousins and distant cousins. We're all brothers and sisters. So literally, what would unite us then? Al-Islam. If Islam is your basis, Islam is your key, then this will help alleviate and remove this sickness. There's a long list of things, if you actually analyze Islam, that helps to alleviate and remove this disease. One of them, which I mentioned, is the belief itself, the aqeedah itself, that number one, no one gets any sin except what they have done themselves. So therefore I can stop blaming someone for something that their forefathers did. It's not their fault. Number two, in terms of they only get reward for again what they've done. So that's a belief system, an aqadi issue. But also practical reasons, practical things. What things can we think of in Islam that would help fester brotherhood? Afshu salam, spread the salams. That is just the salams itself. If you just took as one, if you said what one example can you give me of Islam removes racism, practically, actively removes racism, the order to give salams and to reply to salams given. That means whoever the person is, whether they're from this country, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, if they say assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. And what are you saying? May peace be upon you, and may peace be upon you. You're actually making dua for them. How can a person realistically, in their heart, in the truth of their heart, hate someone because of their race, you could say, their color, but yet make dua for them? It's an oxymoron. You would naturally have cognitive dissonance in your mind. You'd have an action which isn't in line with what's in your head. And in psychology, I think I mentioned this before, in psychology, dissonance in the mind you can't maintain it. You can't do something constantly whilst believe something differently. Something has to change. Either your belief has to change or your actions have to change. So giving salams is one of them. Or another example, and this example is what helped Malcolm X come away from racism, because again, he was much like how I was, used to blame and hate white people for everything. But what changed him? The Hajj. He went to a place where everyone was dressed the same. Everyone looked the same. Well, not looked the same. Everyone dressed the same, did the same actions, humble, izar and rida, doing this, worshiping the same God, praying to the same God,
praying next to each
other, making sajda.
Probably as well, we know in Hajj, probably sitting, chatting,
eating. I mean, if you just think about it, I mean, and
things that he couldn't have, you didn't see back then. It was
couldn't have imagined
segregation. So he's like, what's this? A white guy and a slightly oriental guy and a brown guy and a tanned guy, whatever. It's all sitting together, eating food, praying together. Something that wasn't even allowed back there.
I think what you said there is actually more profound than what I said by far. Where he came from. He came from a place where you had different places for black people, white people in the bus. We had a drinking fountain for one white person, a drinking fountain for the black. Everything was segregated. Now you have a nation of people who all come together. And the Hajj changed him completely. Not only completely, brought him to Islam, because before that he was from Nation Islam. And after that, he became Sunni Muslim. So, again, another example. You can look at anything in Islam, but all of it comes to breeding this brotherhood. Salah, when we pray, we close the gaps. Close the gaps means touching someone, coming next to them, being next to them, making sure they're your brother. Even the time Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where there was an incident between two of the companions, and one of them wanted to call upon the Ansar to help him. One of them said, call upon the Muhajirin to help them. And Messenger of Allah replied, said, this is natina, this is disgusting. This indicates from the very root that Islam came to bring the people together, not to push them apart. And that's why you find throughout history, that's exactly what we see. We see Muslims going throughout the world, and Islam has gone different cultures, different people. They've maintained their culture, but have adopted Islam. And you find so much diversity amongst Muslims in the way they look, in the way they dress, but they all still love each other. And I guess you can say, drawing to a close, one of the things I really loved when I was living in Saudi, I really loved it because for me it was a further reinforcement of the power of Islam. Whenever a Saudi would speak to me and say, where are you from? I said, from Britannia, from England. Always the first question we ask, كيف المسلمون هناك? How are the Muslims over there? Are they being oppressed? Are they being supported? Are they able to live? It was concern for the Muslims in another country. I mean, just think about that. You're born and raised in Saudi Arabia. All you know is Arabs and Saudis and Harabis and whatever tribes you have. But then when you come to hear someone from abroad, your first concern is, how are the Muslims over there? Are they being treated well? Are they being oppressed? Is it something that can... This is a clear manifestation of the power of Islam, how it removes boundaries, if you allow it to. It removes boundaries. It allows you to grow beyond the actions of Iblis. And also it shows you the inherent fallacy of this ideology. And I know one last point I'll mention is that one person actually asked about Islam. They said, is it possible for Muslims to be racist? I said, yeah, it's possible. There's nothing impossible about it. But it's difficult. And the reason why is because inherently within the Quran and the Sunnah, in so many locations, is the antidote or the anti-message of racism. You're all from Bani Adam, you're all from one person. It's hard to maintain a belief that you are better whilst reading in the Quran every Ramadan or every day that you're not better. Whereas in other religions, you actually have in their texts castes, and this person is a higher caste, this person is a lower caste, this one is better, this one is less, not so better. Inherent within other religions is this idea that one person based on where they're born is better than another, whereas in Islam, we don't have such a message. We actually have the opposite. So, I mean, this is an interesting discussion, and I think it's important for everyone to recognize where this ideology comes from, how evil it is, you could say, and how foreign it is, and how we should push it aside. I'm not sure if we have enough time to go for one more narration. How was the narration I wanted to
Yeah, we should have time for that.
There was one narration I wanted to mention. It's an interesting one. It's about Ubadah ibn Samit, one of the companions. So Ubadah ibn Samit was sent to Egypt. Obviously, this is after the death of the Messenger of Allah and from the conquests of Islam. And he went to the Muqawqis, the leader of Egypt. So obviously, as you know, Islam invites people to Islam first. What was interesting is that when he was sent, the Muqawqis said, after seeing Ubadah ibn Samit, he said, who is this person who's come to me, this black person? So Muqawqis looked at this Sahabi and objected, why is this black person talking to me? So bring me someone else other than him. And the other companion said, rather, he was chosen to lead us because he's the best of us. And we have been ordered to listen to his commands and follow his orders, and that's what we're going to do. So they insisted. They didn't capitulate and say, okay, he's the king, we want to try and negotiate, let's bring someone who you like. No. They said, no. We don't care if he's dark. He's gonna talk for us because he's the best of us to do it. He is ahl for that job. He has the right to do that job. And then he continued. So then Muqawqis said, okay, go on, talk then, say what you want to say. So Ubadah ibn Samit said, if you have an issue with my color, then there are thousands of people just like me or even darker than me coming around where I'm coming from. So I basically saying either you remove this problem, or you're gonna have more of these problems moving forward. And Muqawqis said, I'm fearful of you because you're dark. He said, if you're fearful of me, then you better be fearful of a whole nation of people darker than me or like me coming to you. So again, it just shows that the Salaf, the Sahaba, they didn't tolerate racism. They didn't capitulate with racism. They actually said, no, we don't care how he looks. We care who he is. And that's the important message.
Jazakallah for sharing that with us.
Jazakallah khairan.
And also for the viewers, you had a good insight here on how we can try and tackle and try and understand how Islam ultimately does root out racism if we as Muslims practice it properly. And inshallah, as we always say, Islam is perfect, Muslims aren't. But we have to aim to be our very best and have this ihsan, the best in everything we do, inshallah. Until next time, bi'idhnillah, same time, same place, I leave you with the greetings of Islam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.